God is good. We'll speak about this later. Let's go into the Word of God this morning. The passage that we read earlier is a passage that speaks about receiving Him. And I'm going to read it again. But to all who did receive Him. Notice it says, for all who did receive Him, who believed in His name, He gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Juan, capítulo 1, versículos del 12 al 13. Mas a cuantos los recibieron, a los que creen en su nombre, les dio el derecho de ser hijos de Dios. Estos no nacen de la sangre, ni por deseos naturales, ni por la voluntad humana, sino que nacen de Dios. You know, in the aspects of, once again, last week I spoke about human relationships. Once again, I want to speak about that, to put things into context. Una vez más quiero hablar de las relaciones humanas porque quiero poner algo en contexto. One of the beautiful things about human relationships, una de las cosas hermosas acerca de las relaciones humanas, is that when you give yourself to someone, to receive back what you give. Una de las cosas hermosas acerca de las relaciones humanas es que cuando uno se entregue a alguien, que uno reciba para atrás esa misma entrega. Isn't it wonderful when we love someone and they love us back? ¿No es algo hermoso cuando amamos a alguien y nos aman de regreso? Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful that when we love upon our children give us love back? ¿No es algo hermoso cuando amamos a nuestros hijos y les mostramos amor, ellos nos aman de regreso? There are so many thoughts when it comes down to giving ourselves to someone and receiving back. Hay tantos pensamientos cuando hablamos de darnos hacia alguien y que de alguien pues, sea recíproco con nosotros. For someone to reciprocate back to us. It's a beautiful feeling. In every aspect of relationship, en todo aspecto de relación. But what about, pero qué tal when we give ourselves and we are rejected? ¿Qué tal cuando nos entregamos a alguien y experimentamos rechazo? The feelings are completely opposite. Los sentimientos son completamente opuestos. Doesn't feel good, no se siente bien. Feels horrible, se siente horrible. Have you ever entered into a party, into an event, where you're introduced by, you go with someone and they introduce you to your friends? ¿Ha ido usted a alguna fiesta, alguna actividad cuando usted va con alguien y esa persona lo introduce a sus amigos, lo presenta a sus amigos? They introduce you to your friends? Isn't it wonderful when those friends receive you and they say, you know what, you're a friend of him, you're a friend of mine. Cuando te dicen, ¿tú sabes qué? Tú eres amigo de fulano. Ah, pues tú eres mi amigo también. That feels great. But when you walk into the same scenario, cuando entras al mismo escenario y te presentan and they introduce you, and you see, y tú te das cuenta that you didn't click, that they're a little snobby, que son un poquito, ¿verdad?, como pretenciosos y orgullosos, and they don't want to relate, and they don't even want to talk to you, como que no te quieren hablar. You feel uncomfortable, te sientes incómodo, no sabes de dónde pararte, you don't even know where to stand, you don't know where to go. That is a horrible feeling. Eso es un sentimiento horrible. Qué triste nos sentimos. How sad do we feel? But once again, pero nuevamente, those feelings of rejection, esos sentimientos de rechazo, when you try to reach out to connect, and no matter what you do, it seems like you will not be accepted. Esos sentimientos de que cuando tú tratas de alcanzar, tratas de conectar con alguien, y no importa lo que tú hagas, como que no te van a aceptar. What type of feelings and emotions do we feel? ¿Qué tipo de sentimientos y emociones nosotros experimentamos? We may experience resentment. Podemos experimentar el sentirnos, ¿verdad?, molestos y sentirnos indignados. Disappointment. Sentirnos completamente decepcionados. Frustration, frustrados. Sadness, tristeza. Dolor, pain. And we can go on y podemos continuar. You know that some people may cope very well when others don't receive them. Hay mucha gente que manejan muy bien cuando otros no los reciben. And some of the expressions that they may say to cope with that feeling of rejection, algunas de las expresiones que pueden expresar cuando experimentan ese sentimiento de rechazo es they're lost. Ellos son los que pierden. They lost on the wonderful experience of, meeting me. Perdieron, tú sabes qué, la oportunidad especial de conocerme a mí. Los que pierden son ellos. It's their loss. And that's how we cope with that. Y así es como manejamos posiblemente ese sentimiento. One thing is for certain. Una cosa es cierta. En este pasaje que estamos viendo en el día de hoy, in this passage that we are reading today, in the context, a few things that are happening, en el contexto, algunas cosas que están sucediendo, are expressions from the Apostle John, the disciple John. Son expresiones del apóstol, del discípulo Juan. And in the first three Gospels, obviously they center on Jesus' ministry in Galilee. Los tres evangelios se enfocan en el ministerio de Jesús en Galilea. Las primeras tres evangelios. And John centers his gospel on what Jesus said and did in Jerusalem. Pero Juan habla y se enfoca en lo que el Señor hizo y dijo en Jerusalén. Matthew shows Jesus came from Abraham through David and demonstrate that he is the Messiah promised in the Old Testament. And that's glory to God, because that needed to be demonstrated. Mateo demostró que Jesucristo vino de Abraham, vino del lomo de David y demostró de que él era el Mesías prometido del Viejo Testamento, del Antiguo Testamento. That was needed to be expressed. Eso necesitaba ser expresado. Mark shows Jesus came from Nazareth. Marcos muestra que Jesús viene de Nazaret, demonstrating that Jesus is a servant, demostrando a Jesús como un servidor. Luke shows Jesus came from Adam, demonstrating that Jesus is the perfect man. Lucas muestra que Jesús viene de Adán, mostrando que Jesús es el hombre perfecto. But Juan shows Jesus came from heaven, demonstrating that Jesus is God. Juan habla de que Jesús vino del cielo, vino del Padre, demostrando que Jesús es Dios. Así que en este pasaje, therefore, in this passage, that we are reading in this first chapter, este pasaje que nosotros estamos leyendo en el primer capítulo, es vital. It is vital to the doctrine of incarnation. Es vital hacia la doctrina de la encarnación. It is literally titled, The Word Became Flesh. Está literalmente titulado, El Verbo se hizo carne. Let's read verses 1 through 5. Leamos los versículos 1 al 5. Y les voy a recomendar, si lo necesitan en español, búscalo en español. Yo lo voy a leer en inglés por asunto de tiempo. I'm going to read it just in English because of time. If you can, please look for it in Spanish. If you need to read it in Spanish, si lo necesita leer en español o escuchar en español, Juan capítulo 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Once again, nuevamente, Juan está demostrando, John is demonstrating that Jesus came from heaven, que Jesucristo vino del reino de los cielos, que Jesucristo es Dios, that Jesus is God. Y esto es bien importante, and this is very important. In the beginning, en el principio, he's already placed in the beginning. That speaks about the eternity of God, the eternity of Jesus, the eternal Jesus. Juan lo pone desde la eternidad, desde el principio. He speaks about what he did. Habla de lo que él hizo. He created heaven and earth. Creó los cielos y la tierra. En otras palabras, in other words, when everything began, when the beginning began, cuando el principio comenzó, the Word was already there. El verbo ya estaba presente cuando el principio ya comenzó. The Word was already there. The idea is that the Word existed before creation or even time. La idea es que la palabra, el verbo, el logos ya existía desde antes, desde el principio de los tiempos. So John is making this clear, that the Word is not just the beginning, but it is the beginning of the beginning. Juan no está diciendo solamente que el verbo es el principio, sino que es el principio del principio. Nothing that exists would exist if the Word was not existent from the beginning. Nada de lo que existe existiría si el verbo no existiera desde el principio del principio, of the beginning of the beginning. This is important. And he goes on to say, and the Word was God, it was with God, y continúa diciendo, y la palabra, el verbo estaba con Dios, y el verbo era Dios, and the verb was God, and the Word was God. And with this, John is setting one of the basic principles of our faith, the Trinity. Y con esto, Juan está estableciendo uno de los principios fundamentales de nuestra fe, la Trinidad, el Dios Trino, Padre, Hijo y Espíritu Santo. Así que, therefore, this being known as the Word, this being is God. Así que este ser conocido como el verbo, este verbo es Dios. And this verb, and I use the word verb because the word verb is in Spanish, the word verbo, this word became flesh. Este verbo se hizo carne. In verses 3 and 5, en los versículos 3 al 5, John speaks about the work and the nature of the word. Habla del trabajo y la naturaleza del verbo. Once again, nuevamente, all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. Todas las cosas por él fueron hechas, y nada de lo que es hecho sin él hubiera sido hecho. In him was life, en él estaba la vida, and the life was the light of men, y la vida era la luz de los hombres. And the light shines in the darkness, y la luz brilla en las tinieblas, and the darkness did not comprehend it, y en las tinieblas no lo comprendieron, no lo entendieron. But then in verse 6, and I'm just going through the word, y estoy simplemente yendo a través de la palabra. El versículo 6, he says, John says, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. Not the same John. Había un hombre enviado por Dios, no Juan el discípulo, sino Juan el Bautista, otro Juan. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light. Él vino a dar testimonio concerniente a esa luz. So that through him all may believe. Para que a través de él todos crean. See, John came only as a witness to the light. Juan vino simplemente como un testigo de la luz. The true light, verse 9, versículo 9, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. La verdadera luz que venía a este mundo, venía al mundo. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. Estaba en el mundo, pero el mundo no lo reconoció. That was the true light. Esa era la verdadera luz, which gives light to every man coming into the world. Era la luz que le daba vida a cada hombre. He was in the world, and the world was made through him. Él estaba en el mundo, y el mundo fue hecho por él. Y el mundo no lo reconoció, and the world did not recognize him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Vino hacia los suyos, y los suyos no le recibieron. But I want to tell you something this morning, pero quiero decirte algo en esta mañana. Christ was rejected by his own. Cristo fue rechazado por los suyos. But he does not reject us. Pero no nos ha rechazado a nosotros. He has not rejected us. Él no nos ha rechazado. See, Peter, at one point, Pedro en un momento dado dijo, he said, I do not know him. Lo negó. He sort of like rejected Christ. He rejected knowing Christ. Rechazó el no conocer a Jesús. But nonetheless, Jesus takes him afterwards, que Jesucristo lo toma después, y le dice, and he tells him, Peter, you know what? Tend to my sheep. Atiende a mis ovejas. Christ did not reject him. Christ did not come to reject us. Cristo no vino a rechazarnos. He came to save us. Él vino a salvarnos. Christ was hated. A él lo odiaron. But he didn't hate us. Pero no nos odió a nosotros. He was despised, not loved. Él fue rechazado, humillado, no fue amado. But not only does he love us, no solamente que nos ama, but he is love. Pero él es amor. Christ was not received by his people, but he receives anyone that comes to him. Cristo no fue recibido por su gente, pero acepta y recibe a todo aquel que venga hacia él. See, in human relationships, en las relaciones humanas, nosotros podemos tener la tendencia, pues si no me quieren, pues yo no quiero. we may have the tendency of saying, well, if they don't love me, well, I don't love back. And that is a normal human response. It's okay. Eso es una respuesta normal humana. Está bien. But spiritually speaking, pero espiritualmente hablando, we should love, debemos de amar, even if they don't love us, a pesar de que no nos amen, because this is what Christ did for us. If it had been, si hubiera sido, that Christ would love us because we loved him, then this wouldn't have worked. Si se tratara de que Jesucristo nos amara porque nosotros le amáramos, entonces esto no funcionaría. No, you know what happened? Jesus loved us first. Cristo nos amó primero. In spite of us being sinners, a pesar de nosotros ser pecadores, he died for us. See, when we speak about rejection, cuando hablamos de rechazo, we live in a world, vivimos en un mundo que constantemente está rechazando a Jesús. We live in a world that's constantly rejecting Jesus. They reject the gospel, rechazan el evangelio. But that has not stopped the love of God for being outpoured into this world, and for those that receive him will be made children of God. Eso no detiene a Jesús de que el mundo le rechace. His love is still stretching out, reaching out for those that want to receive him, para aquellos que quieren recibirle. See, the world lives in darkness. El mundo vive en tinieblas. And not only do people reject the knowledge brought by the light, no solamente la gente rechaza el conocimiento que es traído por la luz, they run from the one the light comes from in the first place. Ellos huyen de aquel que viene de la luz en primer lugar. The world did not know him, did not recognize him. El mundo no le reconoció. See, the Greek term for world in this verse is cosmos. El término para griego para el mundo es cosmos. And it's often used to refer to the fallen. Y es usualmente utilizado para referirse a los caídos. To the sinful system of thinking. El mundo, la forma de pensamiento pecaminosa y caída. This is the worldly mindset. Este es el mundo, la cosmovisión del mundo. They reject God, que rechazan a Dios. They reject his knowledge, rechazan su conocimiento. They reject his word. And this is why repentance is so important at its core, at the core of the gospel. Por eso es que el arrepentimiento es tan importante en la raíz del evangelio. This is why in the gospel that is preached by the apostles, por eso es que en el evangelio que es predicado por los apóstoles, in the first sermon, the second and the third and the fourth and so on, en todos los sermones que predicaron los apóstoles, el primero, el segundo y el tercero, repentance was at the core. Arrepentimiento estaba en la raíz. A person must be willing to turn away from darkness and into the light. La gente que tiene que sentir el deseo de huir de las tinieblas y correr hacia la luz. They need to run into the light. You know that Jesus has given us many reasons for mankind to believe in him. Jesucristo nos ha dado muchas razones para que el mundo pueda creer en él. He's given us scriptures. Nos ha dado la palabra. He has performed miracles. Ha hecho milagros that undoubtedly, que indudablemente muestran de que Jesús, that showed that Jesus was not just a man, was just not a prophet. He was God. Milagros que Jesucristo hizo que dan a demostrar que no era simplemente un profeta o un hombre cualquiera, sino que era Dios. So for those who want to know, there is more than enough evidence to make the right choice. Para aquellos que quieren conocer, hay más que suficiente evidencia para tomar la decisión correcta. However, people continue to reject them. No obstante, la gente continúa rechazando. Whether it's out of pride, puede ser a través del orgullo, of arrogance, de arrogancia. The fact is they reject them. La realidad es que lo rechazan. And this may seem like bad news. Esto puede ser como que sonar como malas noticias. Pero una de las bendiciones, one of the blessings about the gospel is that it is actually good news. And in those good news, en esas buenas noticias, pueden existir aparentes malas noticias. There might be apparent bad news. But the truth is that it is good news. The gospel is good news. El evangelio son buenas nuevas. You know why? Because of what John says in verses 12 and 13. Por lo que Juan dice en los versículos 12 al 13. But to all who did receive him. Pero aquellos que le recibieron, who believed in his name, que creyeron en su nombre, he gave the right to become the children of God. Les dio el derecho de ser hechos hijos de Dios, who were born not of blood, que no nacieron simplemente de sangre, nor of the will of the flesh, o por deseos naturales, nor of the will of man, ni por el deseo del hombre, but of God, pero de Dios. Born of God, nacidos de Dios. So what does receiving him imply? ¿Qué es lo que significa y implica recibirle? Receive him implies not merely intellectual agreement with some facts about Jesus. Recibirlo no simplemente se relaciona con algunos aspectos intelectuales en los que estamos de acuerdo concerniente a Jesucristo. But what it means also, in addition to that, is welcoming and submitting to him in a personal relationship. Es nosotros relacionarnos con él en una relación personal. See, in the human aspects of things, en el aspecto humano de las cosas, nosotros nos queremos relacionar. We want to relate to others in the aspects of, if they love me, I love back. Queremos relacionarnos. Si me aman, yo amo para atrás. Well, Christ, in spite of us not loving us, he still loved us. Pero Cristo, en concerniente a nosotros, a pesar de nosotros no amarlo con todo y eso, él nos amó. Having a relationship with Christ is simply coming to the place where you understand and accept that the Bible is true. Tener una relación con Cristo significa llegar a un lugar donde tú entiendes que la palabra es la verdad. When it talks about who Jesus is, when the Bible talks about who Jesus is, you understand and you accept that the Bible is true. Cuando entiendes lo que la palabra dice acerca de Jesús, lo aceptas y lo recibes. When you recognize your need for him, cuando reconoces tu necesidad de él, when you need him as your savior, que lo necesitas como tu salvador. Let me tell you, there is no magical process needed. No hay un proceso mágico necesitado o requerido. It is not by repeating some words. No es por repetir algunas palabras. Repeat with me. That is not what it's all about. If that was the case, then we could just say abracadabra and it would be the same thing. Si fuera así, por decir simplemente unas palabras mágicas, pudiéramos decir abracadabra y ya, listo. That's not the way it works. Así no es que funciona. To come into a relationship with Christ, de entrar en una relación con Cristo, it means that you realize, te das cuenta de que tú necesitas un Salvador, that you need a Savior. And that is something that happens in your heart as well as it happens in your mind. Es algo que sucede en tu corazón como que también sucede en tu mente. And you come to a place of surrender, as we sang earlier, y entras y llegas a un lugar de rendimiento como cantábamos. Yo me rindo a Él. I surrender all. There is no magical process needed to enter into a relationship with Christ. No hay un proceso mágico para entrar en una relación con Cristo. All we need to do, todo lo que necesitamos hacer es to rely on Jesus Christ alone for your eternal life. Es descansar en Cristo, únicamente en Cristo para tu vida eterna. Yes, for your eternal life. There is life after this. Hay vida después de esto. Some people think that this life is good. And some people feel that they have it good. Alguna gente se piensan que tienen esta vida, que esto es fenomenal. Uf, lo tengo bien. Let me tell you something. Eternal life with Christ, vida eterna con Cristo, is much better than anything that we can experience on this side of eternity. Vida eterna con Cristo es mejor que cualquier cosa que podamos experimentar de este lado de la eternidad. Having a personal relationship with Jesus, tener una relación personal con Jesús, may seem like an odd concept. Puede sonarse como un concepto como que raro. After all, we can't see him. Como podemos decir, pues no lo podemos ver. He doesn't go to work every day, or physically he gathers with friends and family over the dinner table. Nosotros no lo podemos ver como que va todos los días al trabajo físicamente y que se reúne con sus amigos y su familia en la mesa a comer. You may be unable to text him. Puede que no tengas la capacidad de textearle. You probably can't follow his Twitter account. Posiblemente no puedes seguir su cuenta de Twitter. O puede ser amigo de él en Facebook or friend him on Facebook, Instagram or TikTok. But the fact is that the most, and I will say this again like I said it in the last sermon, lo voy a repetir como lo dije en uno de los últimos sermones, the most significant relationship we can have, la relación más significativa que podemos tener es con Cristo, is with Christ. That is the most significant relationship. And we don't need Twitter, Facebook, or none of that. No necesitamos Twitter, ni Facebook, ni nada de eso. You know why? ¿Sabes por qué? Because through taking on flesh and living a sinless life, Jesus Christ was able to accomplish for us what we could not do on our own. Jesucristo, al tomar el cuerpo humano de cuerpo, ¿verdad? Y vivir una vida sin pecado, Cristo pudo realizar y hacer lo que nosotros no podíamos hacer en nuestras capacidades. He met the standards of a holy and perfect God. Él llenó las expectativas de un Dios santo, perfecto y justo. He served as our substitute. Él sirvió como nuestro sustituto. He took our place. Él tomó nuestro lugar. We should have been hung on that cross. Nosotros deberíamos haber sido clavados en esa cruz. We should have received all those whiplashes. Nosotros deberíamos haber recibido todos esos latigazos. But he took our place. Thank God for Jesus. Dele gracias a Dios por Jesús. That's why when we sing, por eso que cuando cantamos, that we will follow Jesus, que seguiremos a Jesús. When we sing, what a friend we have in Jesus. Cuando cantamos, qué amigo hemos de tener en Jesús. My God. This was enabled by his sacrifice. Esto se hizo posible por su sacrificio. And by God, by Jesus Christ serving as our substitute, y por Jesucristo servir como nuestro sustituto. His life, death, and resurrection, su vida, su muerte y su resurrección, it allows us to freely relate with our Creator. Nos permite a nosotros relacionarnos con nuestro Creador libremente. But those who received them, por aquellos que les recibieron, believed in Him, creyeron en Él. This implies personal trust. Esto implica confianza personal. Born of not blood, nacidos no de sangre, but of God, nacidos de Dios. We have been born again, not of flesh. Hemos nacido de nuevo, no de carne ni de sangre, sino de Dios, but of God. So this makes it clear, esto lo hace claro, that neither physical birth, que ni el nacimiento físico, nor ethnic descent, nor human effort can make people children of God. El nacimiento físico, el descender de un linaje étnico, ni esfuerzos humanos te puede hacer hacerte hijo de Dios. I'm going to say that again. Neither physical birth, nor ethnic descent, nor human effort can make people children of God. This is why I find funny the conversation that Jesus had on John 3 with Nicodemus. Por eso que a mí me da risa la conversación que Jesucristo tuvo con Nicodemo. Because Nicodemus said, you know what? What do I have to do to be saved? ¿Qué tengo que hacer para ser salvo? And Jesus Christ says we need to be born again of water of the Spirit. Tú tienes que nacer de nuevo. And Nicodemus says, yeah, how am I going to go into my mother's womb once again? ¿Cómo voy a entrar nuevamente al vientre de mi madre? He did not understand. This was not a physical birth, no era un nacimiento físico. It is to be born of God. Es nacer de Dios. Nacer del Espíritu, to be born of the Spirit. And through that we are made children of God. Y a través de eso somos hechos hijos de Dios. It is only God's supernatural work that makes us children of God. Es solamente el poder sobrenatural del Padre de Dios que nos puede hacer a nosotros ser hijos de Dios. The right to become children of God is what John says. El derecho, the right to become children of God. Not because of our merit, but because of what Jesus did. No por nuestros méritos. Tenemos el derecho de ser hechos hijos de Dios. Children of God. So this new birth is something that brings new life. Este nuevo nacimiento es algo que trae nueva vida. The new birth is by the word and by the Spirit. El nuevo nacimiento es por la palabra y por el Espíritu. So, when we receive Jesus, así que cuando nosotros recibimos a Jesús, Jesus calls us friend, as we were singing. Cristo nos llama sus amigos. A relationship with Him is a relation of intimacy. Una relación con Él es una relación de intimidad. It is one of security, es una de seguridad. Of being totally known and totally accepted. De ser conocido y de ser aceptado totalmente. Totally known and totally accepted. With all of our faults, con todas nuestras faltas, con todas nuestras cosas, with all of our things, because of Jesus, we are accepted by the Father. Por Jesús somos aceptados por el Padre. And we have a relationship with Him. Y podemos tener una relación con Él. So, there is an invitation. An invitation into intimate fellowship with him. Es una invitación, hay una invitación a una koinonia, una relación íntima con él. It is a relationship where we can be loved completely. Es una relación donde podemos ser amados completamente, where we can be challenged to grow in our faith, donde somos retados a crecer en nuestra fe, where we are transformed into the exact person he created us to be, donde somos transformados hacia la perfecta persona que él nos creó para que fuésemos. If you have received Christ, si tú has recibido a Cristo, and I'm not talking about religion, no estoy hablando de religión, or being part of a religion, o ser parte de una religión. I'm talking about a relationship with Christ. Estoy hablando de una relación con Cristo. Then you enjoy the benefits of that relationship. If you have received Christ, si has recibido a Cristo, tú puedes participar de los beneficios de esa relación. If you have received Christ, you can enjoy the benefits of that relationship. But if you have not received him, si tú no lo has recibido, today would be a perfect day. Hoy sería un día perfecto. Now would be the perfect time. Ahora fuera el momento perfecto. This instant would be the perfect instant. Este instante sería el instante perfecto. To recognize that you are a sinner in need of a Savior. De reconocer que eres un pecador en necesidad de un Salvador. He is whom you need. A él es que tú necesitas. And the invitation, if there is someone in here with us, si hay alguien aquí entre nosotros, to receive him today, es para que lo recibas hoy. See, in life when we experience rejection, we say to those that reject us, they're lost. Cuando en las relaciones humanas experimentamos rechazo, we may say, aquellos que nos rechazan, pues se lo perdieron ellos. But the fact is that those that reject Christ are the ones losing. El hecho es que aquellos que rechazan a Cristo son los que pierden. Losing at having a relationship with Christ. El perder al tener una relación con Cristo. Losing at the joy and peace that surpasses all the understanding. El perderse el gozo y la paz que sobrepasa todo entendimiento. Losing at escaping eternal condemnation. El perder, el escapar la condenación eterna. Losing on having eternal life. El perder, ¿verdad? El derecho a la vida eterna. That is only possible. That is only obtained through accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior, que es únicamente posible en aceptar a Jesús como tu único y exclusivo Salvador. Religion does not save. La religión no salva. Las cosas que nosotros hagamos, the things that we do, as good as they may seem, las cosas que hagamos, por más buenas que sean, they do not save us. No nos pueden salvar. It is only through receiving Christ. Es solamente al recibir a Cristo. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, pero todos los que le recibieron, que creyeron en su nombre, he gave the right to become children of God. Les dio el derecho de ser hijos de Dios. Who were born not of blood, que nacieron no de sangre, nor of the will of the flesh, no del deseo de la carne, nor of the will of man, no del deseo del hombre, but of God. And that is possible when we receive him. Eso es posible cuando lo hemos recibido. Sí. Hay gente, there's people, that salvation is a journey. Que la salvación es una jornada. God is calling you. Dios te está llamando a que tú lo recibas, for you to receive him. And I've learned, yo he aprendido, that when Christ, que cuando Cristo decide salvar a alguien, decides to save someone, nothing, nada, no, nobody or nadie will stop that from happening. Va a parar que eso suceda. His power is eternal. And he's calling you today. Él te está llamando hoy. Is there anyone here? ¿Hay alguien aquí hoy que quiera decir, that may want to say, I want to receive him? Que lo quiero recibir. ¿Hay alguien? Is there someone? Why don't we stand up and praise God? Porque nos ponemos de pie y damos gracias a Dios. Yes, please. Please.
While Cliff and I were in Arizona, temperature 110 degrees, no air conditioning. We're helping our daughter-in-law. Nobody knows each other's story. You don't necessarily know, you visitors here today. We have a son, my husband and I. He's been condemned to prison for 24 years from a DUI. His wife, our daughter-in-law, is essentially a widow. So we go out to Arizona every so often to try and help her, do things we can. So we're out there in that hot heat. And it's not easy. But I'm asking the Lord in quiet time. And mind you, we get up at 4 o'clock in the morning for quiet time because it's so hot out there that it's steaming by 10:30. And you're dying in the heat. So we're talking to the Lord. The sun lights up at 5, and I'm asking him, I'm saying, how do I share with my daughter-in-law's 2 children about you, God? How do I explain what salvation is? And you know what he told me? He said, think about it. It's surrender to trusting me. Surrender. That song we just sang this morning, I surrender all. I almost feel like we should sing it again. Yes. But it's not some church or church person who saves us. They can't fix my daughter-in-law's situation. They can't fix my son's situation. They can't fix our heartbreak. Only God. And it's only him who can help us. And when we think that we're going to find an answer because somebody's going to do something for us to fix our world, it ain't going to happen. Only Jesus. Only Jesus. But what is salvation? It's when we truly let go. Truly fall into trust that he does know what's best. That he did die. He suffered for us out of love for us. And so, brothers and sisters, I don't know where I'm coming up with sharing with you guys like this, but I just felt compelled to share that with you. Surrender all. Everyone, even you who say, I've accepted, I've received Jesus. Every one of us can surrender more every day. Every day. I just read a quote from a man named Fenelon. He was an amazing author. From way back. He said that he's amazed at how sometimes in Christians' lives he sees things that he looks at him and goes, they're Christian. What's their problem? You know, he didn't say it in those words, but and he said, but now I realize that there are Christians who call themselves Christians, but they still have their little hang-ups, and guess what? He says, so do we. Okay? So please don't judge Jesus by what others fail to do. Just love each other. Let's love Jesus, and let's love each other, and let's surrender in trust, not of each other, of him. Sure, we should be able to, you know, in love, care for each other and have some trust there, but the ultimate trust, every person can fail us. Only Jesus.
Amen. God is good. So once again, is there anyone here that would like to come to a place of surrender? Brother Joe, just sing the one again. Oh, you put it away, the notes? Sorry. Oh, okay, don't worry. So we'll sing it a cappella. Oh, there we go. God is good. Amen.